I am Jordan Marks. I'm honored to be your elected Assessor, Recorder County Clerk. And I just want to say thank you to our hosts, Christy and Rick. We have so many resources available to you, and without dedicated folks like the commissioners, Karen and Lambert, like good folks like Christy and Rick, we can't deliver. I mean, I just saw the Senior Real Estate Journal. This is free. This is awesome. So I want to say thank you to you for this opportunity to connect. So today we're going to have some fun. Property tax system in the state of California is Proposition 13. The voters passed Prop 13, and what it did is it created a contract between you and the government that says, I, purchaser of a property, Vicky, when you buy your property, I agree to pay 1% of that purchase price in a fair and open market transaction. That's your base, your value. And that amount can go up to 2% per year. Okay? So it's what you bought it for, that value, at 1%, and that amount can then go up to 2% per year, plus bonds and indebtedness. So those are voter-approved items, like school bonds, Melrose, and some of those other items. Does anybody have any questions about Prop 13? Yes, sir. How come we get to vote on things that are deceitful? And so the question is really, at the answer is at the bottom of it, you as the voters have the right to levy additional taxes up through these processes upon yourself. The process of how they title it has changed and varies based on administrations and years and attorney generals. I think there are initiatives to put it in courts to decide. I can't really answer the naming, but I think we as voters need to be careful with what we're voting on and read the exact outcomes of what you're doing. So whether it's, a bond, an indebtedness for a school district, or even, there's various organizations out there like the Taxpayers Association, they'll rate different school bonds to say, are you really getting your money? Is there the accountability in the process? I can't say every school bond is bad, and I can't say every school bond is good. We have to be an educated electorate, and that accountability comes to us, William. That 2% isn't always a guaranteed 2%. It's actually based on what's called the Consumer Price Index. So nothing to do with real estate. It actually has to do with gas, goods, eggs. Eggs are just through the roof right now, right? So it's that inflationary factor. It's called the California Consumer Price Index. During the pandemic, when gas prices dropped and were low, it only went up 1%. Actually, in the history of Prop 13, it actually went negative 1 year. But for the most part, we generally see that amount can be maximum 2%. So this year, we'll probably see a number of like 7%. It will be capped at that 2% increase. And that's based on that 1%. That 1% will, the number that's based on, will increase up to that 2% increase. And then, if you've seen on your tax bill, they'll list all the bonds and the waters and the fixed fees and all that. That's above that. So, okay, so that's Prop 13. Now, when Prop 13 was passed by the voters, I'm going to come back to you just one moment. We're going to the next slide. Don't worry, I'm not going to forget you. Okay, Elizabeth? Voters also passed Prop 8. Prop 8 was the ability for us to actually lower taxes. Because I know Bianca's like, well, the realtors tell me the prices always go up. Well, sometimes they don't, but over the life of the investment of a house has generally been really great in California. But sometimes the taxable value, that purchase value, right, plus 2%, can actually be lower than the market, can be higher than the market value. So we will never charge you an amount higher than the market value. And this is kind of what it looks like for the visual learners. If you bought a property for $450,000 at 1%, that'd be $4,500 a year. Now, this black line represents the consistency of Prop 13. It's affordable here in California because you can predict and you can budget for that 2% increase, right? So next year, you're going to be 2% more than that $4,500. But if we didn't have Prop 13, and you hit that $600,000 the next year in market value, in other states, they charge you $6,000, a $1,500 increase. In California, we follow and lock it, but if the price of the home in the market drops below that taxable value, we'll actually drop it with the market. And we actually might see this in this next year, people getting tax reductions below what they purchased their property for. And then as the value of the home returns, It can never exceed that 2% or that cap increase per year. So you're protected. So if the home value suddenly pops up and starts heading back up to 700,000 or 800,000, which we saw, coming out of the crash in 2009, you're protected from going above that 2% increase. So you have Prop 13 that keeps your taxes predictable, budgetable, affordable, and then you have Prop 8 that protects you if the taxes are ever above the market value on your home. Any questions about that? Elizabeth, did that capture that? I'm going to get into the homeowners exemption and homestead. I'll break that down right now just since we're here. Homestead is if somebody sues you and you want to protect certain value because it's your primary residence, the state allows you to file that this is your homestead and have certain protections up to a certain dollar amount. So for example, let's say you're in a car accident and they're trying to sue you and go after all your assets. Your home has a special protection. That's called homesteading in the state of California. Homeowners exemption, which I'll get towards the end, that saves you $70 on your property tax bill for you identifying for us that that's your primary residence. So sometimes those get confused, especially from folks coming from other states. But in the state of California, the homeowners exemption, that's a $7,000 or at 1% $70 reduction. You get that for letting us know that that's your primary residence. So we're going to jump into the next slide. Okay, over here on your tax bill is where you're going to find what your taxable value is. That's that Prop 13 amount plus 2% per year. That's going to be your net taxable value. And you'll see the word homeowners there. We're going to get back to that in a little bit. So if you're wondering what your value is, I'm sure you could talk to our host. You could talk to a title person. You can also go and look it up on your tax bill, and we'll let you know. So if you're wondering what's that 1% that you're paying taxes on. All right, so we're going to jump into Prop 19. This is the Home Protection for Seniors, Severely Disabled, Families, Victims of Wildfire and Natural Disasters Act. I think they tried to put lollipops and unicorns in the title, talking about that, William. But it passed, and so this is the new law regarding what's called intergenerational. That's passing it down to your kids or your senior transfer. There's some other areas it's going to impact. I want you to know what those are, and that's on the next slide. And then I'm going to get you enough to be dangerous, Ginger, but then we're going to take you into the two that I think you really need to have understanding. So the two that we're going to talk about today, parent to child, grandparent to grandchild, senior exclusion. The other two are Prop 110, that's for severely disabled. So if you need to upgrade your property, put an elevator in, change property due to severe disability, you're allergic to some of those luxurious plants outside. I had somebody one time that was allergic to dirt. It happens. It was out in East County. They needed to move coastal. That's what the doctor prescribed. We can actually transfer your tax base using the rules that we're going to talk about today. There's no age restriction. It has to do with disability or disaster relief. We've seen folks lose their homes to, unfortunately, to fire, floods. I think seen a number of different natural disasters. We can actually help you either in the rebuilding process or in transferring. Prop 19 impacted the way we do that. So we're there to help you if that ever happens to you and your family. Okay, so the first one we're going to talk about is the parent to child, grandparent to grandchild, what was before known as Prop 58. Now I know somebody's thinking, why is there a parent to child and a grandparent to grandchild, right? Well, the voters, when they passed these initiatives, said the parents could pass to their kids their Prop 13 locked-in value, and the grandparents can pass it to their grandkids only if their kids are not alive. And I know some of you, I have a son now, so I appreciate that you love your grandkids more than you love your kids sometime, right? But I'm not telling you to do something like that. If you do something to your kids in order to pass it to your grandkids, the DA gets involved. It's very messy. I highly suggest you don't do that. But you cannot give your property directly to your grandkids. It has to go to your kids and then to your grandkids if you want them to keep that lower tax base, okay? Under the old rules, and I'm going to talk about old rules versus new rules, as of February 15, 2021, the old rules, you got to give them whatever that tax bill was on your primary residence. Didn't matter values or anything. Primary residence, you got to pass that down. And then you got to pass down other properties up to $1 million of values. Those are second homes, rental properties, commercial properties. So we're just going to skip ahead a little bit here because I want to be... Yeah, Harry, go ahead.
On the number 3.
Yes. As long as it didn't matter. It doesn't matter about residency. It doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter. There was no continuity. Nope, the state did not extend it a couple of years because it was passed by initiative. You voters passed it, and the date was hard set in the initiative. So by February 15th, 2021, if you didn't transfer your property, that doesn't mean put in a trust. It means you actually transferred your property. Then you got treated under the old, more favorable rules. I'm going to get into the more restrictive rules today. It was actually during the pandemic that this happened, and so it's kind of an interesting situation where we're telling you have to record a document. What we actually did in our office took a leadership role on it. We actually communicated to folks, as long as you had it notarized before February 15, 2021, we would accept that, because getting into a government office during the pandemic, remember, was very difficult. So there was e-recording that our office offers, but a lot of folks didn't have access to that. As long as you got it notarized, we honor the notary date. So there's two types of primary trusts that classifications: a revocable and a non-revocable, an irrevocable trust and a revocable trust. So the difference between the two is a revocable trust is when my mom goes to me, "I love you today, you're back in the will." And then tomorrow, no, you're out. You got a grandkid. I'm gonna ask that. You can decide. You can play with who the beneficiary is. An irrevocable trust means you've executed something that once you've given it, you can't take it back. For the irrevocable trust that you cannot alter, that you cannot have any impact on the beneficiaries that were executed before that date, those would fall under the old rules. If it was a revocable trust, which most of us have, then you're under the more restrictive new rules. So we're going to jump into those today. I'm just going to skip past the examples. The big thing to understand going forward is this. Go back to the last one. Is these new rules, and I'll kind of simplify it a little bit. So before we talked about primary residence and other properties, commercial, a second home, a rental property, under the new rules, it was limited only now to your primary residence. This benefit is only for primary residence. It has to be your primary residence. Sorry, Gina and Susan. It has to be your primary residence. Karen, I'm going to block you here, but don't worry, I'll tell it to you. And it has to be your kid's primary residence. So if Harry was getting something from his parents, they had to live there, and then Harry had to be like, I'm moving into the property. Before, it didn't matter. And Harry could live in another state. He can go back and forth. In this new rules, if Harry ever leaves the property and no longer maintains it as his primary residence, we'll actually have to reassess at that point. If you rent it out, we have to reassess at that point based on the date that your parents gave you the property. So the second, let me just get through these facts real quick. I'm going to come right back to you, I promise. The first thing is it's limited to primary residence. The second is they also put a cap on it. Remember before I said there was no cap, it doesn't matter. We just transferred over whatever tax was there. Now it's your taxable value, that amount that's on your tax bill, plus $1 million of market value. And I'm going to show you what those examples look like in a moment. Kids have to live in the property. I know you're thinking, I'm going to shove all my kids in one property? You're damn crazy. There's no Brady Bunch rule, I promise. It's just at least one of the kids that are the beneficiaries. And you have to get a homeowner's exemption that we talked about, saying that this is my primary residence within 1 year of the date of transfer. So it's not within 1 year of when your kids get the property. So for some folks that don't have a trust, that their property goes to the courts, probate, it's known as, they have to file right away. They have to just file right away. Otherwise, the taxes go up to the market value. And then we can fix it going forward once they file. But you want to know, file homeowner's exemption right away when your kids get the property. And you have to do it within 1 year, where under the old rules, you had up to 3 years. So a little bit of a different, more restrictive rules. Yes. In order to keep the tax value within 1 year of your death, they have to move into the property. So I'll give you some examples of what this looks like. We're going to go to the next slide. Okay, so for example, if you have a primary residence that you paid $100,000 for in 1990, the taxable value, that 2% that went up, the home's now worth taxable value $160,000. That's what we tax it based on. Or at 1%, you're paying $1,600 a year. That's what you're paying. Now, The market value of the home, which we can see today, especially in Encinitas, is $2 million. It's not uncommon, right? A 1990 home that you bought is now $2 million. The way it works is you take that taxable value, the $160,000, you add $1 million to it. So now it's 1.16, and you deduct it from the market value, which here was $2 million. That additional amount, that excess, is now added on to the old tax bill. So $840,000 plus 160, that's the amount on your tax bill. Your kids are going to now pay $10,000 in taxes versus you were paying $1,600. Under the old rules, your kids would have kept the $1,600, but now these are the new rules. Next slide. In most parts of the county, now Encinitas falls into that last example. Oh, and I apologize, and those extra properties, those all get charged at market value now. Forget about extra properties and being able to pass down the additional tax value savings. Next slide. Most houses across the county are under this example, but I'll say Encinitas fell under that last example where the homes have exceeded that $1 million of value. So if you had that home that you bought for $300,000 in University City, went up over time to $420,000 or $4,200 in our example. You add 420 plus a million, 1.4. If the home is worth less than that 1.4, taxes stay the same. So the home in our example went up to 1.3 million, which is your tax amount on your bill, plus a million is greater than that. So the taxes stay exactly the same at $4,200. Kids have to now move into the property and still make it their primary residence. And if they ever move out, they get reassessed, unfortunately. Yes, assessed value is the amount that you purchased for at your original purchase plus 2% per year. The market value is, we use similar models. I'm a certified property tax appraiser, so we'll use what's called comparables, similar to, I don't want to say Zillow, because Zillow does sometimes Zillow up and down, or we have a process that we follow in the state rules for comparables. So, if you're in one of those communities that every home had a 2 or 3 bedroom and it's easy and we can just, okay, what did they sell for? There's rules that we follow for that. No, but I'll say generally what happens is when somebody passes for IRS tax purposes, those are the federal taxes, not your state, you generally get an appraisal, whether it's done by a realtor or somebody else. You'll get somebody that will actually put a value on the home for those tax purposes. I would say that same thing, you want to make sure that we're in a similar value range. And yes, it can be appealed, Harry. Okay. So generally, you're going to get what's called a supplemental tax bill. The kids will get that, and they have 60 days to appeal and say, hey, you didn't get it right. I think it's different. And we'll work with you. Call us. We'll talk it out. And then if we need more time, we'll have you file an appeal just to make sure we protect your rights. Because we're going to get into the more favorable senior portion. Don't worry. It doesn't all go downhill like this. That portion fell within the courts to determine whether it's a single issue rule, whether that, I think that's what you're talking about, Ginger. Can we have so many things in one initiative? The courts determined that was legal. And so, yeah. These things are vetted and done at the state level. And whether it's the title that's challenged or what's said in the books or these other things, I agree this was a lot to dig into. And our office did a lot of work to proactively reach out to the community and educate voters on what's inside. I didn't want to tell you how to vote for it. That's Marjorie's decision, or Elizabeth or Harry. We wanted to tell you what's in it so that way you could understand what was happening, because these are pretty complicated. But let's get back onto now the senior portion. We're going to help save you money. Yes, I think the fires and the different portions. So for the grandkids, they have the same rules. If they get the property and they ever change it from being their primary residence, they rent it out, or they're going to get reassessed. Okay, so we're going to jump to the next one. We're going to get into the senior portion, which is maybe more applicable to some folks. But I just wanted to highlight, if you have a family farm, call me on it. There are some benefits that were carved out for the farmers. Yeah, that's fine. We're going to move to the next slide as we do that. Hi, Susan. Yes, it can go from child to parent. A lot more flexibility before. You'd be amazed how many people would try to transfer the property back and forth and back and forth. Folks find themselves in their office. They like their kids today. I'm going to transfer the property. Under the old rules, we used to be able to kind of like, okay, well, we can help make this happen. Under the new rules, it doesn't happen, unfortunately. So as people we just try to get out there proactively and educate folks so that they have that opportunity to not make that mistake and pay additional property taxes. Okay, so we talked about the parent-to-child portion, right? But there was also that senior portion that Ginger talked about. That was what was then called Prop 6090. You don't need to know that. After April 1st, 2021, these rules changed. So I'm just going to go straight to the new rules because that's what's most applicable. The reason I talk about the old rules a little bit is we're still in this transition period. It hasn't been 2 years yet where those old rules fully fade out. So under the new rules, which are far more favorable, if you're over 55, you're a senior. Now, I'm going to say this, and I really want you to hear me on this. I did not write these rules. I don't think 55 plus is a senior. I think 55 is the new 25. I just want to put that out there, okay? But for these rules, you have to be over 55, at least one person that's on ownership of the property. Before you had one time, now you get 3 times in your lifetime. So I think it was Carolyn's friend that may have stepped out. She said she had done a senior transfer before. You get to do another one. Before, you only got to do it 1 time. Now it's 3 times. That there used to be a restrictive cap. Before, if you bought over a certain amount, you didn't get the benefit. That's gone away. It's far more flexible now. I love that. And you have 2 years to do the deal and to purchase, sell a primary residence and buy a new primary residence. And before, it was restricted to certain counties. So if Gina's like, I want to go to Riverside, I want to go to Mendocino, more likely all those folks want to come to San Diego, right? Now they can come statewide, where before it was restricted to certain counties. I want to show you what that looks like. So here's a really good example. You have a great realtor. Can we use Christy as an example? All right. So Christy helps you buy a home in 2000 for $300,000, right, Karen? Congratulations, you bought your home. Super excited. Over time, thanks to Prop 13 and the predictability and budgetability and affordability of Prop 13, your taxes have only gone up to $4,200 based on $420,000 value. But your home is worth $1 million. You're selling it for $1 million. Congratulations. But if it wasn't for Prop 19, you're like, maybe I wouldn't have moved because I can't afford a tax bill based on $1 million, right? That's a $10,000 tax bill. You're like, I like my $4,200 tax bill. But Prop 19 said you can buy a replacement and carry that lower taxes with you. So I'm going to give you what's called a below the cap example and an above the cap example. And Vicky's like, what is the cap, Jordan? The cap is your sales price. Whatever you sell for, that's your limit, okay? And that determines whether your taxes might go up a little bit more or whether they might stay exactly the same, all right? So we sold it for $1 million. That's your cap. And now we're going to buy something for below what you sold for, below the cap. Because you're like, you know what? I worked really hard. I want to take $100,000 off the table, retire a little bit more comfortably. Now, without Prop 19, when you bought a $900,000 home, I know Elizabeth's running the math, that's a $9,000 tax bill. That's significantly more than the $4,200 she was paying before. But because it's below, $900,000 is less than what you sold for, below the cap, below $1 million, her taxes are going to stay exactly the same at $4,200 a year. That's a $4,800 savings for Karen. Congratulations, Karen. All right, we're going to go to the next example, which is an above the cap example. All right, now Elizabeth's like, I'm going to buy something bigger. I worked really hard. I need to go and buy something that, you know, is beachfront. It's going to cost me a little bit more from what I sold for. Right? You're ready for the beachfront, right? I see it. It's cool. So let's say Elizabeth had the same example. Great realtor. Bought it for $300,000, paying tax on the $420,000. That's $420,000 a year. Sold it for $1 million. But she's like, I'm going to buy the property that's $1.2 million. At 1%, that would be a $12,000 tax bill every year. That's a big jump, right? But thanks to Prop 19 senior transfer, we take the cap, what she sold for, the $1 million, and we deduct the difference from what she bought. So $1 million minus 1.2, Rosario's running the number, that's a $200,000 difference. You add that $200,000 to her old tax bill of $420,000. Now she's going to pay taxes based on $620,000 at 1%. That's $6,200 a year. I went to law school. Trust me, I'm not very good at math. but you can do the math with me on this. So instead of paying $12,000 a year, she's paying $6,200. That's a savings of $5,800 a year. That's a significant amount towards retirement, right? Elizabeth's ready to go get beachfront right now. So those are the two major examples of Prop 19 senior transfer. That's how you get to upgrade your lifestyle without really increasing your property taxes. So can two people that decide that they're going to say, I'll sell my home, you sell your home, we're both over 55? The answer is no. It's only 1 to 1. So now there are different ways to go about that. Let's say you're like, I'm going to sell mine, you sell yours, but we'll take my tax base because it's the better deal. You can both move in together and both be on the property, and that's not an issue. As long as the person selling and buying is on title for the primary residence, you can do that. So what we're seeing a lot these days, Tony, is intergenerational buying. You're like, hey, I want to keep my kids in Encinitas, but for them to keep the family here, it's a little bit harder, right? So I'm going to go and sell my home here and go and buy this home over here that has an ADU in the back. I know we had an ADU question, right? So I'll take the back ADU and I'll give the front house to the kids. I've seen this. And then they'll have the lower tax bill. And when they do that, here's a real insider trick. They'll put their kids as 99% owner on the property. And they'll stay on 1%. And the reason they do that is, when Prop 19 was written, Lauren asked about that restrictive, if my grandkid moves out, under the senior transfer rules, if you move out after having done the deal, they get to keep it. And then they can move out and they can rent it. And there's no requirement of residency or or being in your homeowner's exemption afterwards. So there's a lot more flexibility with the senior transfer. So if you do the parent to child, your kids have to stay on the property. It has to be the primary residence. If you do the senior transfer, you could be there for a year and then be like, well, I'm going to go to Italy. And then you can rent it out and you can still keep that lower tax base. Does that kind of... So there's a little bit more flexibility when you decide to take that route. And, you know, again, things are written by initiative, don't always get ironed out. And that's why you see things like this in, you know, little differences. Yes. I'm going to give you some reminders and then I'm going to show you how to do it. So remember Prop 19 went into effect for the senior transfer after April 1st. If you did at least one portion of the deal, right? So let's say you sold, but you're coming up to that 2-year purchase period. As long as you purchase after that April 1st date, we're going to treat you with the more favorable rules. So you're not restricted because you did the sale under the old rules. We're going to give you the new rules as long as you buy in this period up until April 1st, 2023. That's when the 2-year period from that portion, and nobody will talk about Prop 60 or 90 again afterwards. If any of the property is used for a commercial purpose, so let's say Barry's growing something on his property. Barry, what are you growing? Barry's a tomato farmer. Well, you know, in Encinitas, we got tulips, right? He's got a tulips on his property. He's got a little selection. He takes them to the farmer's market. Okay. And it's a clear commercial. Most likely it's an ADU that you have a tenant in, right? If you have a tenant at the time of sale in your ADU, then we are going to exclude that portion of your property and use that's commercial use, not residential use. So if 25% of your property is for that ADU, then you're going to get a 25% reduction on what can be applied towards your next purchase, if that makes sense. Now, let's say Barry's like, well, I got rid of my tenants, turned it back into my Pilates studio, and now I'm doing Pilates going into my home sale. It's back to being a residential use. It's at the day of sale and what you're using it for. We have divorced couples. Now, under the old rules, you only got to take it one time, right? Still, only one person from the divorce gets to take it. So if you're getting divorced, make sure that your attorney says, and I want the lower tax value to go with my client when they go to buy their new property. The other person still gets the benefit to buy another property and start doing it 2 more times in their lifetime, but only one person gets to take the tax value, okay? We have parent to child and senior transfer. So we talked about the 2. You can only do 1. So you could either give that lower tax value to your kids, or you could take it within a senior transfer. Now, remember, you could do a senior transfer and then give it to your kids, but you can't from the same property go, well, here's to the kids and here's to me. I actually had this problem one time where the kids got a property from their parents, filed the parent to child transfer. They got the lower tax value. The parents went to go do their senior transfer, and we had to reject them. Came into the office. It was a big fight. The parents didn't know the kids had taken it. The kids didn't want to give it back. Please don't bring that to our office. Work that out in advance. Thank you very much. Only one person has to be over 55. I know that's what you're thinking, right? Dating a young 25-year-old. Can I do the deal with, and so the answer is yes. It could be with a grandchild. It could be with a friend. It has to be a primary residence for one person, and that person has to be over 55. There's no legal, married, familial, relationship. They have to be a human being. So, yes, Carolyn, is that granny place on the same property?
Yes.
Okay, great. So you got a big house, got a granny place, so you can leave the property to your kids, your children. Only one of them is required to live in it in order to qualify. Yes. Now, the thing in Carolyn, remember, there's $1 million cap now. So if we were to look at, and I'm happy to look up properties, don't worry. This is the friendly place where you get to ask the assessor questions without worrying about being reassessed or anything like that. It's not church, okay? This isn't Catholic church, but we're, you're in a safe space. We'll call it the safe space, okay? But when did you buy your home? Okay, so you inherited the property, which means that you probably got a lower tax base from improved the property. So we added taxes for what you built above what was there before. Okay, and that was in 1990. And so what was the value, would you say, at that time of the home? The new house that you had in 19... Okay, $800,000. And then today, what would you say? Right. So $800,000 over time at 2%, which over 30 years at 2%, that's 60% increase on $800,000. So you still might be paying tax on $1.4 million, right? But the home's worth $4 million. Let's just use that. If you add $1 million to the $1.4 million, that's $2.4 million. That means your kids are going to pay the difference between the $2.4 million and the $4 million. That's $1.6 million plus what you already have there. So their taxes are going to go up based on $3 million. That's $30,000 to $40,000 a year when you're paying taxes based on $18,000 a year. So, which is why, that was a big change, and which is why a lot of folks transfer their properties, unfortunately, before the Prop 19 rules. So, it's actually for Encinitas and Point Loma and other communities on the coast, we're seeing this as a major issue. It's actually causing, because the kids might not have the salaries that can pay the taxes on that property. Well, we'll call Lucky over there. No, we know who's moving into the house, don't we? But for some families, what they're doing, again, is if they're like, hey, now this sounds like this home means a lot to you and your family, but what they're doing is they're reorienting the property by buying something else and then getting something that better fits the overall family that they're trying to preserve there. And then when they do the senior transfer, remember you can add people on. They'll add their kids on to take 99% of the property at that point. So when you pass, that 1% doesn't really impact them of that increased tax value. But it sounds like this property has, you built it yourself and it has a, yeah. So now, if there's a property like that, some people try to transfer it early before the values increase even more over time. So that way the kids lock in the value. But check with your IRS professional, check with your gift tax and your state. The kids, when somebody passes, get what's called a stepped up basis. That means their capital gains tax gets eliminated. So these are all things that you have to consider. We're one piece of your entire tax process. So you really want to do a balance between the federal and the state and the property taxes before you do any sudden movements, okay? So, but that's one of those unique puzzle pieces where we try to work with you early and get you as much information so you could do what's right by your family. You can, and if they have questions, and some of them do because the Prop 19 rules are fairly new still, we're happy to get on the phone with them and help them out as well. So it depends, did they gift you? The gift rules generally apply, like if somebody passes and gifts, then there's no capital gains. Yeah. Yes. So the question is, can you do the same thing with a rental property? And you just kind of answered in the fact that it's not your primary residence. All these benefits are attached to your primary residence. Now, Bianca, could you move into your rental property, make it your primary residence, and then do a lot of this? Yes. One of the big differences between the federal and the state rules is IRS, in order to get the benefits, you have to live in the property at least 2 out of the last 5 years. For the state rules, for me, you can claim this as your primary residence, and in a month, pass it to your kids or do a senior transfer. It doesn't matter to us. So those same restrictive time period rules don't apply to the locals. That's a good question. Okay, Prop 19 is 2 deals. So remember, you have to buy, you have to sell. And I'm going to get into what happens when you buy first and then sell. Under the old rules, there was these differences, these index, they'd give you a little bump for having accounted for time that your money's in the field and going to buy something. When they passed Prop 19, it wasn't included in the initiative. But when the legislature went to go fix Prop 19 with new rules, they actually brought these more beneficial bump rules over. So I'll explain that, what that means. If you sell your home and you buy within the first year, you get 5% increase above on your cap above your sales price. So if you bought for $1 million, it's $1 million plus 5%. If you bought in the second year, it's $1 million plus 10%. Remember, you have to do the deal within 2 years. So remember, the cap is $1 million based on what your sales price is. So it went to $1,050,000 and then $1,100,000. If you buy first and then sell, which means that you don't need any adjustment inflation, you don't get any adjustment inflation. So I'm going to walk through that again because I realized I could be clear on that. The old rules had this little benefit to say, hey, we understand that as you go and look to buy over the 2 years, inflation happens. So they gave you a little bump. So if you sold your home and then you go buy, the first year you get a 5% increase above your sales price before to raise the cap, and then you get 10% the second year. If you buy first, which means you already have the home in hand, and then you have 2 years to sell, you don't get a bump because you already have the place and you bought it. So a small little benefit on that from the legislature. And then filing for Prop 19. It's a one-page application. It's really simple. When we first started this process, it took us about 6 to 9 months. I mean, it was a brand new process, and it kind of just said, here, there you go, figure it out, and you got a couple of months to do it. Some offices in the state of California of assessors, up until about a month ago, didn't process their first Prop 19 application. Our office started doing it right away. So that means, Rosario, you had to pay these increased taxes until everything got fixed. We are now in about a 60 to 90 day processing in our office. Part of the thing that takes a little bit of time, and Debbie is like, what happened to this great customer service comment in 6 to 9 months? We have to actually go out and appraise the deal still. It takes time for our appraisers to actually go out and appraise your sale and your purchase. So some of these things take a lot of time. If you're going in from different counties, we have to reach out to other counties and say, has your appraiser gone out and looked at the value of that home? Because everything is done based on the fair and open market transaction. So we're making sure that you didn't buy a property for a significantly lower amount from a brother or sister, you know, and not inside trading, but just that everybody pays based on market. Yes, William? So you move into what's called a tax rate area. And so when you leave one tax rate area, you enter a new tax rate area, and then all the bonds apply based on exactly where you live. So the bonds are a benefit to a school district or a community college or something right there where you live. You don't carry that with you. And everything is based on that taxable value. And I'm just going to keep eye on time because I want to be respectful. Don't worry, not rushing out right away. But I got a couple more things we're just going to zoom through real fast, and then we'll circle back to more questions after this, if that's all right. Or below the cap. Below the cap. I'll talk to you about your deal. Just make sure I understood that, so that way we can help you. But the question is, can I rent out my primary residence, buy something cheaper, and then come back? Yeah, the answer is yes. Yeah, so there's a lot of flexibility with the senior transfer portion, not with the parent to child, but the senior portion, you can do that. Now, again, in order to transfer the tax base to another property, you have to sell one to get the other. But in order to rent and go back and forth, that doesn't impact us in our decision process. So, Stephen, we're going to go forward a couple of slides here. This is the homeowner, wait, go back. This is the homeowner's exemption. This is what saves you $70. This is also what you need to file. Your kids need to file within 1 year of them getting the property. And it's very easy to do. On your tax bill on the next slide, you're going to see, again, it says the word homeowners on your tax bill. And if you don't see the $7,000 there, that means you're not getting it. Call us. We'll make it really easy on you. You can sign it and scan it, and we'll process it in that day for you. And we want to make sure we get that in. We can't give you relief going backwards, but we can get you into the system and saving right away. Next slide. We have also the disabled veterans exemption. Now, if you're not filing the homeowner exemption, but you're a disabled veteran with 100% VA rated disability, or the surviving spouse of that veteran, you can actually get a benefit that's up to about $1,500 a year. It turns out to be about $1,700 a year off up to $1,700 a year off your property taxes. And so it requires that you have your DD 214, your honorable discharge, other than dishonorable discharge. It's a pretty easy application. We really try to do as much outreach to the veteran community and to the surviving spouses to make sure that we're delivering this thank you. I mean, these are the folks that lost a limb or really may have lost their life that gave so much to our country. And so when I got to the office, this was one of my primary focus. We had 4,500 disabled veterans and surviving spouses getting this benefit. Today, actually about a week ago, we have 14,000. So that's $10 million more every year going back in the hands of San Diego County veterans. And so if there's somebody that we can help serve, please send them our way. We're here to make it happen. Next slide. You get a cake when we hit 8,000. So I got to figure out what to do for my team with 14,000. Next slide. Next slide. Make sure that we don't forget our surviving spouses that served along with our veterans. Next slide. We did some major property tax reduction for small businesses, but we're going to go to the next slide. Something just to let you know, if you own your property today, is anybody ever worried that somebody might steal their property? It happens. It's out there. There's commercials on television. I think Newt Gingrich does the infomercial on it. We actually have a free service called Owner Alert on our website. You can register now for free. Very easy at sdarcc.gov. It is a free service, and it will let you know anytime a property transfers that with your name on it. Don't worry, I'll get out of the way for you, Susan. Or if somebody puts in a lien on your name. So if you don't have a property, you can register your name. And now, Harry, what's your last name?
Simon.
So for other Harry Simons out there, you're going to get their notifications as well, but you'll probably have an idea whether that was me or not. But this is instant notification of a transfer related to your property, a transfer of a lien on a name that is yours or similar to yours. And this is important. Somebody tries to steal your property and we can shut them down with the DA's office within the first 60 days. Imagine somebody, you get that credit card alert. If you don't turn that thing off within like 5 minutes, they're already at Walmart or online spending, right? This is the same idea. It shuts them down right away. And we've been very successful in signing folks up and letting them know. More importantly, it lets the criminals know that you don't want to do business here in San Diego County because you can be protected by Owner Alert. A lot of other counties don't have this notification system. So we're very excited about it. Please take that couple minutes and sign up today. So by law, if it's fraudulent or not, and somebody brings a document to our office that meets legal requirements, we have to record it and take it. Now, we have instituted multiple ways of capturing folks that are committing these frauds. So we have been more successful in prosecuting these folks, and that has led to less of the fraud happening. So high definition cameras, sign-in sheets, we have different ways of it. And you know, it's kind of interesting. Sometimes it's your neighbors. You know, you pass away and somebody, well, I haven't seen the family around and I'm just going to go and transfer the property into we see a lot of that. So this is the way that we protect you and your family. And plus, Owner Alert's great if your kids aren't in the state. You can add them on there as well as one of the emails to receive the notification. So that way it protects your property and protects your wealth that you've built for your family. Yes? It's 10 properties per email address. So, all right, next slide. Okay, this is the good news. I'm going to answer any questions you have, but more importantly, you have my phone number, you have my email address, and I'm going to give you the email address. I apologize, I thought it was up here. It's going to be prop19@sdcounty.ca.gov, just prop19, and I'll give that so it's emailed out to everybody. That's your follow-up email address. I have a team of experts that are prop19 leaders in the state, including myself. We answer the emails, making sure you get the right answer, and that way you're comfortable moving forward and helping upgrade your lifestyle without increasing your property taxes for you and your families. Yeah, I don't find it. So on the trust side, you see the trust attorneys that have Prop 19 knowledge and well-versed. You have realtors that are well-versed and that take the time and study and ask us questions. But ultimately, you have our office too. So when you have a great realtor, they're going to say, hey, we need to ask this question. Let's call the office. And that's what they do. And we're there to help them out and help you through the process. And we do a lot of continuing education for the attorneys. I would say, Gary, as a whole, this should be pretty straightforward from the fact that on the senior transfer, you're selling one and getting another. The question is, what do you want to do when you buy that next place? Do you want to set your kids up? If you don't have, the less you have, think about, the simpler the transaction is. So Gary's question is, if you buy first, do you pay the property taxes on the property you purchased? Yes. Do you get the other one to come over right away? No, because you're getting the benefit still on that other property. So you're paying two property taxes. You're paying the increase on the new property until you sell the other one and transfer it over. And then, like I said, we're in a 90-day processing now. We were originally 6 to 9 months, but some things happen. If you're going between counties, there's some counties that are from Northern California that have 7 staff members that do all the same work that we do. It takes them a little bit longer to get out there and appraise a property. But if you're doing everything within San Diego County, within 90 days, my office is getting this done. Well, okay, that's a great question. 3 properties, I got to make a decision in a day. What am I doing, right? Remember, you only get this benefit on one primary residence. So one kid's going to get the benefit and the other 2 properties are going to get taxed at market value afterwards. So I wouldn't necessarily evict the tenants if the tenants are paying, but you got to look at your portfolio. But could you transfer your primary residence or give your kids that benefit and then go into another property and then do that again? You could do those things over time. And that's why we're talking today, so you could be thoughtful about planning over time. You've talked to your IRS professional, you've talked to your CPA, and you're like, okay, this is a good idea. Let me give that gift right now to child A. And then I'm going to go move into my next property for 2 years, establish my residency there for IRS, and then I'm going to you could do that. You could be thoughtful about that. And there's a state rule, so there's only so much you can gift before they have to pay capital gains tax. Again, it's a bigger picture that you want to consider, but now you got one key component saying, okay, I have properties, let me be more thoughtful about that. And so I'd probably engage a trust attorney. Is it a working farm, a working ranch, or is it like your primary residence? Okay, so we'd have to look at, do you have a house on the property, and then we separate that out from the field, and then on the field portion we could give them up to $1 million of market value and then transfer that lower tax base down. So the same rules, but we would segregate the property out into those 2 portions. Right, so it would be a commercial portion. So we're growing your daffodils, tulips. Yeah. Yes, Ginger. I like how somebody jumped out and said marijuana right away. I'm just going to say, I don't know who it was. I heard it from this side of the room. So our office and myself and my boss spoke out pretty openly. I mean, you could read the Union Tribune on how we felt about Prop 19 and the concerns that we had, that there's a lot attached here and what would it do to family wealth building and the opportunity for families to stay together. It took a lot of that away. So, I think that there's folks like the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association that we're working with that are trying to figure out how do we readjust this so that way you can have the benefit of the senior portion and fix the parent to child portion. But ultimately, the voters decided, and we administer the law now. And that's why you could read the Union Tribune where that we highlighted these things that there, and the other place. I mean, we gave 40 presentations on Prop 19 in advance to say, hey, there's some real challenges here, and it's going to impact family wealth in California. And so we're seeing families that have 3 homes on the same block where the parents wanted to keep the families together, and now they're selling 2 and keeping 1, and those scenarios are happening, Ginger. But we're working to make the system better now. So we have one part of it that had positive changes, and now we're going to go back and reform the other one. We're working, but that has to happen because it's in the Constitution of California. It has to be done by you, the voters, through an initiative process or by the state legislature, putting it to a vote. So this is a general ADU question, not necessarily, because it's primary residence is the benefit. It's for your primary residence. But if you have a rental property and you add a room or you add an ADU, that additional value is added on to your locked-in property tax Prop 13 rate. So if you have a Prop 13 value on a home at $100,000, and then you add an ADU in the backyard for $200,000, that's the value. We'll add the $200,000 to the $100,000, and now for the entire property, you're paying based on $300,000. It could, but it won't reassess your home. If you bought the home 44 years ago, the home and everything that was there when you did that, those taxes and all of that will stay the same. Some folks are concerned, if I add an ADU, does it bring everything else to the market value? And it doesn't. Just the addition, the improvement that is made. So it's like if you add a pool, if you add something else, we add on that amount only. Everything else is preserved and protected. And then we lock that in at Prop 13 protection. So,
Did you have a question?
I know, and by the way, I know this is a lot to digest. So that's why I said it's just the beginning of the journey, and it gets you thinking about what's in front of you and how we all operate under state rules. All right, that's a good question. You have to kind of decide. I think that we have a great service here that answers a lot of what people are concerned about. But the same process happens. The only difference is with the paid service, they pay for your attorneys, which it does require attorneys to go and sort your property out, unfortunately. But we start with the DA's office right away, and then there is a legal portion to it. So you have to kind of say, am I paying $58 a month, or am I going to self-insure and say, okay, if it happens, I'll pay $5,000 in attorney's fees. It isn't rampant. It's not like 800,000 properties are under attack today. The Padres had it happen to them. It's kind of a crazy person, but that's a whole nother story. But it is happening. So the vulnerabilities tend to happen with folks that are traveling. They've recently become deceased and the home is noticeably vacant. Those are the things, if you're traveling out of town for a year, this is something to really consider. How do I watch my property? And this free service might be enough for you. So, yes. You file your paperwork with the county that you moved into. So after you've sold and after you've purchased or purchased and sold, once it's done, then you file the Prop 19 paperwork with that county. And again, it's a one-page application. It's very simple. You'll feel really good about the process, as far as like a administrative application process is concerned. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank you to our hosts, Christy and Rick. Let's give them a round of applause. And it's an honor to be here to serve you.
Thank you so much for coming. How many of you learned something new today? I have to say I learned more than one new thing. So thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate you being here today.
And everybody should be checking their property tax bill to make sure they have that homeowners exemption. Good.